The book of Proverbs is one of the most intimate, searching, and practically powerful books in all of Scripture. It does not speak to us from a distance. It does not deal in abstractions or distant theological arguments that feel removed from everyday experience. It sits beside us in the middle of the night when we cannot sleep, when our hearts are heavy with worry and uncertainty, when the road ahead seems impossibly narrow, and when we are not entirely sure we have the strength to take one more step forward. It opens its pages and says simply and directly, here is what you need to know. Here is how to live. Here is the wisdom that will carry you through whatever it is you are facing right now. Attributed largely to King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, Proverbs is a collection of divine truth, refined through human experience and brought together as a gift to every generation that would follow. It was not written for the scholar's library or the theologian's study alone. It was written for the streets, the marketplace, the household, the conversation between a parent and a child, the moment of a broken heart, and the crossroads of a questioning mind. Solomon wrote the majority of it, and yet the book also contains contributions from other sages, from Agur and Lemuel and the anonymous wise men who understood that no generation ever outgrows its need for wisdom, and that the deepest truths about life have a way of staying relevant no matter how much time passes. The opening verses of Proverbs tell us plainly and without ambiguity what this book is for. It is, in its own words, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving guidance in prudent behavior, in doing what is right and just and fair. It is for giving prudence to those who are simple and knowledge and discretion to the young. But do not make the mistake of thinking these lessons are only for the inexperienced or the newly started. The book of Proverbs is for all of us, at every stage of life, in every season, and most of all in the hardest ones. Because it is in the hardest seasons that we discover who we truly are. It is when relationships fracture under the weight of pain or misunderstanding, when financial circumstances collapse and provision feels uncertain, when health fails and the body we relied on stops cooperating, when trust is broken by someone we thought we could count on without question. When hope seems impossibly far away and the days feel heavy and long, it is precisely then that the wisdom contained in these pages becomes not merely interesting or intellectually edifying, but essential. Urgently, desperately essential. It becomes the difference between sinking and standing, between reacting and responding with intention, between wandering in darkness and finding, even in the middle of the storm, a lamp for your feet and a light for your path that does not go out. The central pillar of the entire book of Proverbs is announced in the very first chapter, in the 7th verse, and it is so foundational that it is repeated and echoed throughout the rest of the book in various forms. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Everything else in Proverbs flows from this single statement. Every lesson, every warning, every promise, every practical principle about work and relationships and speech and money and friendship and justice, all of it is built upon this foundation. To fear the Lord is not to cower before a tyrant who is waiting to punish you for the smallest misstep. It is to live with a deep, reverent, steady awareness that God is real, that He is present, that He sees and knows all things, that He cares profoundly about the details of your life, and that His ways, however they may sometimes differ from what we expect or prefer, are ultimately, completely, and trustworthily good. To fear the Lord is to let that truth shape how we speak, how we choose, how we treat the people around us, how we handle money, how we respond to temptation, how we carry ourselves through every season of life, and most of all, through the ones that are most difficult. So today, we are going on a journey together through 60 lessons drawn from this extraordinary book. 60 truths rooted in the ancient and enduring wisdom of Proverbs, that speak directly and practically into the hardest chapters of your life. These are not surface-level inspirational slogans or pleasant sentiments that sound good but dissolve under pressure. They are deep, honest, sometimes searching and challenging, and always transformative words. Words that have carried human beings through every imaginable form of suffering and difficulty across thousands of years, and that have the power today to reframe your circumstances, steady your heart, strengthen your character, and remind you over and over again that you are not walking through this season alone. Whether you are in a season of grief over a loss that has left an emptiness you do not know how to fill, or facing confusion about the future and the direction of your life, or navigating a relationship that has fractured in ways that feel beyond repair, or carrying financial strain that keeps you awake at night, or walking through a period of spiritual dryness when God feels distant and your prayers feel like they are reaching nothing. Whatever the texture of your hard season, these 60 lessons are for you. Walk with us through every one of them. Let them settle into your spirit. Let them do what the Word of God always does when it is received with an open and humble heart. It illuminates, it stabilizes, it convicts, it comforts, and it transforms. Before we step into the very first lesson, I want to pause for just a moment and speak to you personally and directly. Right now, as you are watching this video, people from all over the world are watching alongside you. People from the United States and the United Kingdom, from Canada and Australia, from South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Brazil, the Philippines, India, Germany, Jamaica, New Zealand, from cities and towns and villages whose names most of us would never know, in time zones spread across the full width of the globe. Different languages in different homes, different cultural contexts, vastly different life circumstances. And yet here we all are, gathered in this same space around the same ancient wisdom, the same God, the same deep and universal human need for truth that holds us when life comes undone. There is something genuinely moving and beautiful about that, and I never want to take it for granted. I would love to know where you are watching from today. Please take a moment and drop your country or your city in the comments. It always blesses my heart deeply to scroll through those comments and see the breadth of the community that gathers here. How far this message travels, how many lives across, how many places are being touched by God's word delivered in this way. You are not simply a passive viewer with a screen in your hand. You are part of a living, breathing, global community of people who are seeking God's wisdom together, and that is something genuinely extraordinary. And if this content has spoken to your heart, if these deep studies of Scripture have ministered to you, encouraged you, helped you think through the hard seasons and the difficult questions, given you something to hold on to when other things gave way, then I want to ask you something with genuine warmth and real sincerity. Please subscribe to this channel if you have not already done so. Hit that subscribe button right now. I am asking you not as a formality or a routine request, but because it truly matters to this ministry. When you subscribe, it helps these videos reach more people. People who are sitting somewhere in the world right now, in a hard season, needing exactly this kind of content and not yet knowing where to find it. Your subscription is part of how they find it. It keeps you connected to a steady, ongoing stream of scripture-based wisdom and teaching that I genuinely believe will strengthen your walk with God and accompany you through whatever is ahead. There is also a way to become a member of this channel community, and I want to gently and warmly invite you to consider it. As a member, you step into something closer, a tighter community of believers who are genuinely serious about growing in God's Word, about going deeper than the surface, about being the kind of people whose faith shows in how they actually live. And as a member, you also get early access to videos before they are made public, which means you are among the very first to receive each new message. If that speaks to something in you, please take a look at the membership option in the description below. It would be a genuine joy to have you more closely involved. Now, let us begin. 60 lessons from the book of Proverbs. For the hardest seasons of your life, let every word find the place in you where it is needed most. Lesson 1. The fear of the Lord is where wisdom begins and where it ends. Proverbs 1:7 declares with the authority of a foundational principle, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. If there is one lesson that must come first, before every other principle, before every piece of practical guidance, before every relational or financial or personal insight that Proverbs offers, it is this one. Not because it is the most dramatic or immediately practical, but because every other lesson depends on it, flows from it, and only makes complete sense within it. Wisdom does not begin with education, though education can serve it. It does not begin with intelligence, though intelligence can be a tool. It does not begin with experience, though experience refines it. Wisdom begins with God. Specifically, it begins with the acknowledgement that God is real, that He is sovereign over all things, that He is holy and separate from all that is corrupt and false, and that we are accountable to Him. Not in a begrudging, reluctant way, but in a way that reflects the reality of who He is and who we are. In the hardest seasons of life, our instinct is typically to rely on our own understanding. We analyze the situation, we make plans, we strategize and worry, and attempt to think our way through to a solution. And there is nothing inherently wrong with careful, thoughtful reflection. But Proverbs is insistent. When that analysis and planning is not rooted in reverence for God, when it does not begin with Him and return to Him, it leads us into the kind of wisdom that ultimately proves inadequate for what we actually face. The fear of the Lord is not the fearfulness of a slave who acts rightly only to avoid punishment. It is the deep, settled, reverent awe of a person who knows they are standing in the presence of someone infinitely greater and infinitely more trustworthy than themselves, and who has chosen to orient their entire life around that reality. It is the posture that keeps us honest with ourselves, genuinely open to God's correction and direction, willing to follow His ways even when they are inconvenient, costly, or counterintuitive. This is the foundation. Begin here, in every season, in every decision, every morning. Start with the fear of the Lord, and you are already walking in the right direction. Lesson 2. Trust God more than you trust your own understanding. Completely, not partially. Proverbs 3:5-6 gives us one of the most beloved and yet one of the most genuinely demanding instructions in all of Scripture. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. These words land very differently depending on the season you are in. When life is relatively calm and everything is basically functioning as expected, they can feel like a pleasant devotional reminder, something to nod at and carry pleasantly forward. But when life is truly in upheaval, when the medical news is frightening, when the relationship is breaking apart, when the financial situation is desperate, when the future you thought you were building has collapsed and you cannot see the way forward, these words become either a lifeline that saves you or a test that reveals the depth of your actual trust. To trust with all your heart means not holding anything back. It means releasing the desperate grip of control that comes from fear and saying, with genuine surrender, Lord, I do not understand what is happening, and I do not know where this is going, but I trust you with it completely. And to lean not on your own understanding is to acknowledge, at a level deeper than intellect, that your perception of your situation, however intelligent and experienced you may be, is necessarily limited by your vantage point. You can only see what you can see. God sees the whole landscape. He sees what is coming, what is possible, what purposes are being worked out in the difficulty that your eyes cannot access from where you stand. When He directs your paths, He does so from a position of complete knowledge and complete faithfulness. There is nothing in your situation that surprises Him, nothing that overwhelms His capacity to lead you through it. The invitation of this verse is not to be passive or irresponsible, not to stop thinking or planning or making the best decisions you can. It is to do all of those things from a posture of deep surrender to a God who can be trusted with everything you have, everything you fear, and everything you hope for. Trust Him, not partially as a backup plan. Trust Him fully. Lesson 3. Do not despise discipline. It is the language of a father who loves you deeply. Proverbs 3:11-12 says something that does not initially feel like good news, but is, when you understand it fully, one of the most comforting and hope-filled truths in the entire book. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent His rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those He loves, as a father, the son He delights in. The word despise here is important. It is not merely a warning against finding discipline unpleasant. Of course it is unpleasant. The warning is against something stronger, despising it, treating it with contempt, responding to it with resentment, with bitterness, with a closing of the heart against what God is doing in the difficulty. Because the truth that this verse reveals is that discipline is not evidence of God's rejection. It is evidence of His active, engaged love. A parent who simply allows their child to do whatever they wish without correction, guidance, or boundaries is not a loving parent. They are an absentee one, the parent who disciplines, who sets boundaries, who corrects with loving intention. That parent is doing the costly and time-consuming work of genuine love. They are investing in the formation of a person, not merely the comfort of a child. God disciplines those He loves, and the ones He delights in, not the ones He has given up on, the ones He is most actively shaping. In the hardest seasons, especially the ones that feel like a process of painful stripping away, of circumstances, of illusions, of things you were holding on to that were not actually as solid as you thought, this truth is a foundation. God is not absent. God has not abandoned you. God has not turned His face away. He is a Father who cares deeply enough to work in you, to form in you what can only grow through difficulty, to carve the space in you for qualities of character, patience, humility, compassion, depth, genuine faith rather than circumstantial faith, that could not be produced any other way. Do not despise it. Ask what is being formed in you. The Father is at work. Lesson 4. Wisdom is worth more than any material treasure you could acquire. Proverbs 3:13-15 makes a claim that should stop us in our tracks. Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. The language here is unambiguous and emphatic. More profitable than silver, better returns than gold, more precious than rubies. And then the sweeping conclusion, nothing you desire can compare with her. This is not a modest suggestion that wisdom is quite nice to have along with the other things you pursue. It is an absolute declaration of supreme value. In a culture that measures the quality of a life by what has been accumulated, the house, the savings account, the career title, the social recognition, this is not a popular message. But consider what wisdom actually provides. Wisdom tells you which battles are worth fighting and which you should walk away from before they consume you. Wisdom tells you when to speak and when to be silent, and the difference between the two is often the difference between a relationship preserved and one destroyed. Wisdom tells you when to hold on with everything you have and when it is time to release. Wisdom prevents the devastating decisions made in moments of pain or panic or anger, the ones that can take years to undo and that leave behind damage that no amount of financial success can repair. In the hard seasons especially, wisdom is the asset that no economic downturn can eliminate. It cannot be lost in a market crash or stolen by a thief. It cannot be destroyed by illness or taken away by betrayal. It grows with every difficult experience that is received with humility and reflection. And it grows most reliably in the lives of those who pursue it with the same intensity and intentionality that others pursue financial success. Seek wisdom with everything you have. Invest in it through the daily reading of God's Word, through the cultivation of relationships with genuinely wise people, through prayer, and through the honest reflection on what life and difficulty are teaching you. Nothing you could acquire will serve you better. Lesson 5. Guard your heart above all else. Everything you are flows from it. One of the most penetrating and practically significant verses in all of Proverbs is found in chapter 4, verse 23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Read that again slowly. Above all else. Not as one of several important priorities. Above all else. Not second on the list, not something to attend to when you have time, the primary, most urgent, most consequential concern of your daily life. Guard it. The heart, in the biblical and particularly the Hebraic sense, is not merely the seat of emotion. It is the center of the will, the place where the deepest motivations of a person are formed, the wellspring from which the entire quality of a life flows outward. It is who you actually are at the deepest level, beneath the performance and the persona and the public-facing presentation. The command to guard it is a command for active, intentional, ongoing vigilance. A guard does not sleep on the job. A guard does not take days off. A guard does not decide that a given period seems safe enough that the post can be abandoned. The heart requires constant watchfulness, because the threats to it are constant, subtle, and, in the hard seasons especially, intensified. In seasons of suffering, bitterness is one of the most dangerous things that can enter an unguarded heart. It begins as a reasonable response to genuine pain. Someone wronged you, something was taken from you, something deeply unfair happened. And if it is not caught, named, and brought before God, it grows slowly and silently until it has fundamentally changed the landscape of who you are. Despair is another thing that settles into an unguarded heart. The slow erosion of hope, the gradual acceptance of narratives about yourself and your future that have no source in God's truth. Fear, too. Cynicism, resentment, the accumulated weight of unprocessed grief. These do not announce themselves loudly when they arrive. They slip in quietly, and they make themselves at home. And then, over time, they change everything that flows outward, the words, the choices, the quality of love you are able to offer, the relationship you have with God. Guarding the heart means being intentional and disciplined about what you allow to settle in it, what you dwell on, what you return to in your thoughts, what voices you allow to speak into it most regularly and most deeply. It is the most important inner work you will ever do. Lesson 6. The righteous may fall many times, but they always rise again. Proverbs 24:16 is one of the most straightforwardly encouraging declarations in the entire book. For though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again, but the wicked stumble when calamity strikes. 7, in the symbolic language of Scripture, carries the meaning of completeness or totality. The point is not a precise count of falls. It is the assurance that no matter how many times you go down, the character of the righteous person is to get back up, not to never fall. Not to be immune to failure or defeat or overwhelming circumstances, but to rise every time. This is a truth that has sustained countless people through the experience of repeated failure, of trying again after a painful mistake and failing again, of rebuilding after loss only to face another loss, of praying through doubt and crying through grief and getting back up when there is nothing in the visible landscape to suggest that getting up will make any difference. The righteous rise not because they are stronger than other people, not because they have superior willpower or greater resilience as a natural personality trait. They rise because they have a God who lifts them, a truth that sustains them when feelings cannot, and a spirit that has been taught by experience not to accept any defeat as the final word. Falling is not failure. Falling is part of the journey. The question is not whether you will fall in the hard seasons. You will. The question is whether you will allow the fall to be the final position, or whether you will, with all the strength you have, and trusting God for the strength you do not have, rise again. Rise and take the next step. Rise and face the next day. Rise and try again. Rise and believe again, 7 times or 70 times 7, or as many times as it takes. The righteous rise. That is what you are. Lesson 7. Pride carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. Choose humility. Proverbs 16:18 is one of the most consistently confirmed truths in all of human experience. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. This is not merely moral instruction, it is a description of a spiritual law as reliable as gravity. Pride, the particular kind that refuses all correction, that elevates itself above others, that dismisses the authority of God and the counsel of wise people, that insists on its own way with an arrogance that has no room for learning or growth, carries within it the seeds of its own undoing. It does not need an outside force to bring it down. It is self-defeating by its very nature. In the hard seasons, pride takes on specific and recognizable forms. It appears as the refusal to ask for help, because asking would mean admitting that we cannot manage alone. It appears as the insistence on being right in a conflict, even at the cost of the relationship itself. It appears as the unwillingness to admit fault or acknowledge the ways in which we have contributed to the difficulties we face. It appears as the arrogant certainty that we know better than God about how our lives should unfold, what the timeline should look like, and what the outcome should be. And in every one of these forms, it cuts us off from the support we need, from the correction that could save us, from the grace that could sustain us, and from the humility that is the actual posture through which God pours out his help. Humility does the opposite of everything pride does. It keeps us teachable, open to growth, able to receive what we need, rather than insisting that we already have it. It keeps our relationships repairable, because the humble person can say, "I was wrong," and mean it. It keeps us close to God, because the humble person knows their need and brings it honestly to the one who can meet it. In the hardest seasons, humility is not a concession of weakness. It is the foundation of strength. Lesson 8. Kind words are not trivial. They carry the power to heal what medicine cannot reach. Proverbs 16:24 offers a deceptively simple truth that carries more depth the more carefully you consider it. Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Honey in the ancient world was the sweetest, most nourishing substance available, not a luxury, but a source of genuine sustenance, with both nutritional and medicinal properties. The comparison is intentional and precise. Gracious words, words offered with genuine kindness, with warmth, with care for the person receiving them, are sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. They nourish at the deepest level, and they work a physical embodied healing. We tend to underestimate the power of words. We tell ourselves, or tell others who are hurting that words are just words, that they should not have so much effect, that the mature thing is to not be so sensitive. But this is not the testimony of Proverbs. Proverbs is insistent, in passage after passage, that words carry extraordinary weight. They shape reality. They determine outcomes. They build lives or they damage them. The gracious word spoken to a struggling person at the right moment can be the thing that keeps them going, the thing that breaks through the isolation of pain and makes them feel seen, known, and not alone. And the harsh or careless word, spoken thoughtlessly in a moment of frustration, can become a wound that takes years to heal. In the hard seasons, both dimensions of this truth are urgent. If you are receiving kind words from people around you, let them in. Do not deflect them with false modesty or the dismissiveness that comes from pain. They are medicine for your bones. And in your own speaking, even in the hard season when you yourself are depleted and struggling, choose your words with intention. Offer grace, offer warmth. What it costs you may be significant in a difficult season, but what it gives may be someone else's lifeline. Lesson 9. A soft answer at the moment of conflict holds more power than you realize. Proverbs 15:1 teaches one of the most practically applicable and consistently difficult principles in the book. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The entire dynamic of a conflict can turn on the choice of a single word, a single tone, a single moment where one person chooses to respond with gentleness rather than matching or escalating the other person's heat. We have all experienced both sides of this. The conversation that was beginning to turn ugly and was brought back from the edge by one person choosing to lower their voice rather than raise it. And the conversation that spiraled into something destructive because both people kept adding fuel. A soft answer is not weakness. This cannot be said strongly enough. It is not the absence of conviction, the surrender of your dignity, the admission that the other person is right when they are not. It is the exercise of remarkable, deliberate, intentional self-control in a moment that is calling for something different from self-control. It is the choice to prioritize the relationship over the moment, to prioritize resolution over the satisfaction of having the last word, to prioritize peace over the short-lived victory of a sharp comeback. It requires genuine inner strength, far more than a harsh response does, which is simply the path of least resistance. In the hard seasons, our relationships are typically under the most strain they will ever face. The people closest to us bear the spillover of our pain, and we bear theirs. Tempers are shorter, patience is thinner, and the capacity for misunderstanding is higher. The person who has internalized the practice of the soft answer, who can, even when tired and hurting, choose gentleness in the moment of confrontation, becomes an instrument of peace in what could otherwise become a cycle of mutual wounding that takes years to undo. Lesson 10. God is drawn to the humble and actively gives grace to them. Proverbs 3:34 states a principle that runs like a golden thread through the whole of Scripture. He mocks proud mockers, but shows favor to the humble and oppressed. The word translated as favor here speaks of grace, undeserved, generous, active kindness. God gives grace to the humble. He is not merely neutral toward them, not merely withholding punishment as a reward for their modesty. He actively pours out favor. He draws near. He responds. He gives to those who are genuinely humble what he withholds from those who insist on their own sufficiency. There is a deep encouragement in this for anyone walking through a season of personal insufficiency. And hard seasons are nothing if not experiences of insufficiency. When you are not managing well, when the resources are not enough, when the strength has given out, when you do not have answers, when you feel inadequate to what is being asked of you. Every one of these experiences, which our culture teaches us to be ashamed of and to hide, is actually, when brought honestly before God with humility and trust, a doorway to receiving His grace more fully. The thing that feels like weakness, the genuine acknowledgement that you cannot do this on your own, that you need God, that you are dependent and insufficient, is the very posture that opens wide the channel of divine grace. God gives it to the humble. He resists the proud. This means that the most spiritually strategic thing you can do in a hard season is to stop pretending you are managing, stop performing strength you do not have, and bring your honest need before God with the simplicity of a child who knows they need their father. He will respond. He always does. Lesson 11. When hope is long deferred, God holds the weight of the waiting with you. Proverbs 13:12 does something unusual and deeply compassionate. It names a painful human experience and validates it without minimizing it. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. This is not a verse that rushes to the resolution. It sits for a moment in the reality of the sickness, the ache of waiting, the particular kind of heartache that comes from carrying a hope, a prayer, a longing for something good, and watching time pass without it being fulfilled. The person who has been praying the same prayer for years, the parent who has been waiting for a prodigal child to come home, the person who has been standing on a promise from God that has not yet materialized in any visible way, the person whose healing is still not complete. Proverbs says that waiting makes the heart sick. It does not say you are wrong to feel it, but the verse does not stop there. A longing fulfilled is a tree of life. When the waiting ends, when the prayer is answered, when the healing comes, when the prodigal returns, when the breakthrough arrives, it is not just relief. It is not just the removal of pain. It is something life-giving, generative, nourishing, something that produces vitality and renewal and becomes a source of life not just for you, but for everyone around you. The tree of life is generous by its nature. It bears fruit that others can receive. The testimony of your fulfilled longing will become life to someone else who is still in their waiting season, who needs to hear that the God who made you wait is also the God who answers and fulfills. In the meantime, in the hard, long, uncertain meantime, keep your hope anchored not in your timeline or your expectations, but in the faithfulness of a God who does not forget His promises. Your hope is not misplaced. Your waiting is not wasted. He holds the weight of it with you. Lesson 12. Anxiety is real and it is heavy, but a good word has the power to lift it. Proverbs 12:25 speaks with simple, direct honesty about one of the most pervasive experiences of human life. Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. The word for weighs down in the original language carries the sense of bowing something low, pressing it toward the ground. Anxiety does not merely inconvenience, it bends, it presses down. It makes the ordinary tasks of daily life feel disproportionately heavy because the heart is already carrying a crushing, invisible weight before the day even begins. This is the experience of countless people in every season, and in the hardest seasons, it is intensified to a degree that can feel almost unbearable. Proverbs does not minimize this experience. It names it. And then it points with beautiful simplicity to something that has genuine power over it, a kind word, not a speech, not a lengthy argument for why things will work out, not a list of reasons not to worry. Simply a kind word, spoken with genuine care, given with warmth and without agenda, the kind of word that communicates, I see you, I am here, you matter, you are not alone. This is not a small thing. In the right moment, from the right person, a genuinely kind word can break through the weight of anxiety, and give a person the lift they need to take the next step. This means something practical for all of us. Seek out the good words that are available to you. Immerse yourself in the Word of God, which is full of exactly the kind of kind, true, deeply reassuring words that your anxious heart needs. Find people who speak life and spend time with them. And become a giver of kind words to those around you who are also carrying anxiety you may not be able to see. You do not always know the weight the person beside you is carrying. Your simple, genuine act of kindness might be the thing that tips the scales on a day they were struggling to survive. Lesson 13. The friend who tells you the truth, even when it stings, loves you more than the one who flatters you. Proverbs 27:6 contains one of the most honest and challenging definitions of genuine love in the whole of Proverbs. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. We all prefer, at the level of instinct and emotion, to be told what we want to hear. Reassurance feels good. Validation is comfortable. To be agreed with and affirmed and confirmed in our existing perspective requires no adjustment from us and carries no discomfort. And while there is absolutely a time and a place for genuine encouragement and sincere affirmation, Proverbs is clear that this alone is not what real love looks like. A friend who will tell you with genuine care and at personal cost that you are making a destructive decision, that the pattern you have fallen into is hurting yourself and the people you love, that you are not seeing a particular situation clearly, that there is something you need to face that you have been avoiding. That friend is giving you something that no amount of comfortable flattery can provide. They are giving you the gift of truth. The wounds of a friend are trustworthy wounds because they come from a place of genuine investment in who you are and who you are becoming. They come from someone who cares more about your flourishing than about your immediate comfort or the smooth surface of the friendship. The hard seasons of life will reveal who your true friends actually are with a clarity that easier seasons never produce. The people who stay when it is difficult and costly to stay. The people who do not abandon the friendship when being associated with you in your difficulty becomes socially or personally inconvenient. The people who will speak truth to you when truth is what you need, rather than making you feel good with words they know are not entirely honest. Find those people. Treasure them fiercely. They are rarer than you might think, and they are among the greatest gifts God can place in a human life. Lesson 14. Without a sense of God-given vision and direction, a life begins to lose its way. Proverbs 29:18 speaks to something that is both deeply practical and profoundly spiritual. Where there is no vision, the people perish, but blessed is he who keeps the law. The word translated as vision here is not primarily about ambition or the kind of goal setting that motivational culture promotes. It is a word for prophetic revelation, for divine direction, for the sense of purpose and calling that comes from God Himself, for the thread of meaning that holds together the individual moments of a life and makes sense of them as part of a larger God-authored story. Without that sense of divine direction and purpose, people and communities begin to drift. They make choices based on impulse and emotion. They lose the narrative thread. They fall into patterns of self-destruction, not always dramatically or all at once, but gradually and almost invisibly. In the hardest seasons, the loss of vision is often one of the most disorienting and dangerous things that can happen. When the future you thought you were building has collapsed, when the dream you believed was God-given has died, when the direction you were walking in has been suddenly and violently altered, when the plan that made sense of your efforts and your sacrifices no longer seems to be in operation, the darkness can feel complete. Not just the darkness of grief or pain, but the particular darkness of not knowing why you are here, where you are going, or whether any of it means anything. This verse speaks directly into that experience and calls us back to God's Word, back to prayer, back to the community of faith, back to the sustained seeking of a God who is still speaking, still guiding, still working out purposes that are larger than our comprehension of them. God has not abandoned his purposes for you simply because your understanding of them has been disrupted. Seek vision. Stay close to the source of it. He will give direction again. Lesson 15. Your reputation is one of the most valuable things you possess, and it is built one choice at a time. Proverbs 22:1 places something above even material wealth in its hierarchy of value. A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. The good name that Proverbs speaks of is not fame or public recognition in the modern sense. It is the reputation that comes from a life consistently lived with honesty, integrity, genuine care for others, and faithful follow-through on commitments. It is the kind of name that means people can trust you, that when you say something, you mean it, that when you promise something, you deliver, that when you are needed, you show up. This is built not by grand gestures or dramatic public demonstrations of virtue, but by thousands upon thousands of small, often unobserved choices made over the course of a lifetime. The choice to tell the truth when a lie would be easier and less costly. The choice to keep a commitment when circumstances have made it genuinely inconvenient. The choice to honor someone else's confidence rather than trade on it for social currency. The choice to do good work when no one is watching, because the quality of the work itself matters. Each of these small choices is a brick in the building of a good name, and taken together, they construct something that outlasts virtually every material achievement. What makes this lesson so specifically relevant in hard seasons is that difficulty is precisely the context in which character is either protected or destroyed. The pressure of crisis tempts us toward shortcuts we would not consider in easier times. The fear of a bad outcome tempts us toward dishonesty that we rationalize as necessary. The exhaustion of a prolonged, difficult season tempts us toward the kind of compromises that would once have seemed clearly unacceptable. Proverbs is a steady voice in those moments, reminding us that what we protect in the hard season, the integrity of our name, the consistency of our character, is worth protecting at almost any cost. Lesson 16. Speak for those who have no voice. Justice is an expression of wisdom. Proverbs 31:8-9 contains one of the most morally urgent and socially significant directives in the entire book of Proverbs. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. These words are given in the context of instruction to a king, to someone in a position of power and authority, but their application extends far beyond the throne room. Everyone who has any measure of influence, any ability to speak into situations where others are being treated unjustly, any platform or relationship through which they can advocate for those who are being overlooked or exploited, carries a responsibility that these verses articulate with stark clarity. The vision of wisdom in Proverbs is not a narrow, privatized vision of individual virtue and personal flourishing. It is a vision of a community shaped by righteousness, in which the powerful do not simply extract from the vulnerable, but protect and advocate for them, in which the person who has voice uses it on behalf of the person who has none, in which justice is not merely a theoretical commitment, but a practical daily expression of what it means to live in accordance with God's character and values. In hard seasons, it can feel almost impossible to turn our attention outward. Our own pain absorbs so much of our capacity, and the thought of engaging with anyone else's suffering when we are barely managing our own can seem overwhelming. But there is a paradox here that Proverbs and the whole of Scripture consistently affirm: the act of extending ourselves in compassion and advocacy for others, even from a place of our own genuine need, has a way of doing something in us that no inward focus ever achieves. It reconnects us to something larger than our own story. It activates a kind of generosity that has its own healing properties. Speak up, even from the hard season. Someone needs your voice. Lesson 17. Release the hunger for revenge. Let God be the one who settles accounts. Proverbs 20:22 gives direct and demanding instruction to one of the most powerful impulses in human experience. Do not say, "I'll pay you back for this wrong." Wait for the Lord, and He will avenge you. There is almost nothing more natural in the aftermath of a genuine wrong than the desire to make it right, to ensure that the person who hurt you bears some consequence, to balance the scales that their actions have tipped. The desire for justice is not in itself sinful. God Himself is deeply and passionately committed to justice, and He made us in His image with the same basic impulse toward it. But personal revenge, the attempt to take justice into our own hands and make someone pay according to our own judgment and timeline, almost never produces what we hope it will. It does not bring the healing we expect. It often escalates the conflict in ways that create more damage. It positions us as judge in a case where our perspective is necessarily limited and our objectivity compromised. And most significantly for the purposes of this verse, it steps outside the protection and provision that come from trusting God to handle what we cannot handle appropriately ourselves. Wait for the Lord. These words require an enormous trust. They require the belief, tested and real, not merely theoretical, that God sees every wrong that has been done, that He is not indifferent to it, that He holds all accounts and will settle them all in His time, with a precision and a comprehensiveness that no human act of revenge could ever match. This does not mean passive acceptance of ongoing abuse or injustice. There are times when appropriate action is necessary and right. But the spirit of this verse is about releasing the corrosive, consuming hunger for personal retaliation and laying the case before a God who is perfectly qualified to judge it. He will not forget. He will act. Wait for Him. Lesson 18. Generosity is not a luxury for good times. It is a spiritual practice for all seasons. Proverbs 11:24-25 presents one of the most counterintuitive and yet most consistently confirmed financial and spiritual principles in Scripture. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. The mathematical logic of this is entirely backwards from the way scarcity thinking operates. If you have limited resources, you protect them. If the future is uncertain, you hold more tightly to what you have. You give when you can afford to, and in the hard seasons when you cannot afford to, you pull back. But Proverbs tells a different story. The person who gives freely gains more. The one who withholds unduly comes to poverty. The generous person prospers. The one who refreshes others is refreshed. This is not a promise that every generous act will produce an immediate and corresponding financial return. Proverbs is far too sophisticated and honest about the complexity of life to offer simplistic transactional formulas. It is a deeper truth about the spiritual economy of a life lived in alignment with God's own character. God is by nature a generous God. He gives lavishly, abundantly, without calculation. The person who lives generously is living in harmony with who God is and how His kingdom operates, and that alignment produces a kind of flourishing that miserly self-protection never does. In the hardest seasons, the temptation to pull back from generosity is most acute. But those seasons are precisely when the practice of generosity can do the deepest work in us, breaking the grip of fear, affirming in action the belief that God will provide, opening our hands when the anxiety of scarcity would have them clenched. Give in the hard season, not recklessly, not irresponsibly, but generously. Trust that the God who sees your open hand will not ignore it. Lesson 19. The people you walk closest to will shape you more than you may realize. Choose wisely. Proverbs 13:20 states a social and spiritual reality with quiet but firm clarity. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. We are all being shaped constantly by the people we spend the most time with. This is not merely a pop psychology insight. It is a description of the way human beings are designed. We absorb the values, the thought patterns, the habits, the emotional orientations, and the basic assumptions about life of the people we are in closest, most regular relationship with. This happens gradually, subtly, and often without any conscious awareness. But it happens. The shape of our character is partly our own choices and partly the accumulated influence of our most significant relationships. In the hard seasons, this reality takes on heightened importance. Who you walk with in the difficulty, whose voice is most present in your life, whose perspective most shapes how you interpret your experience, whose values most influence the decisions you make in the pressure of the hard season. These things will have a lasting effect on who you become on the other side of it. The person who navigates difficulty surrounded by cynical, bitter, or chronically foolish companions tends to emerge from it having absorbed those qualities. The person who has invested in relationships with genuinely wise, godly people, who is in consistent community with those who are walking faithfully with God, who are marked by integrity and genuine wisdom, will be shaped by that community even in the darkest seasons. You cannot always choose your circumstances, but you can be deliberate about the voices you allow closest to you. Seek wisdom in your relationships. Invest in friendships with people who are genuinely wiser than you in specific ways, and be willing to create distance from relationships that are consistently pulling you away from wisdom, however socially costly that may be. Lesson 20. Diligence is not just a virtue, it is an act of worship and a seed for harvest. Proverbs 10:4 makes the connection between effort and outcome direct and unambiguous. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. And Proverbs 12:24 adds a relational dimension. Diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor. The book of Proverbs has a thoroughly positive and robustly practical theology of work. Labor is not a curse to be avoided or minimized. It is a gift, a calling, a field of meaning in which human beings exercise the creative and productive capacity that God Himself built into them. The command to work and be fruitful in the earth was given before the fall, not as a consequence of it. Diligence, the steady, committed, consistent, day-after-day application of effort to the tasks before us, is both a practical virtue and a spiritual discipline. It reflects the character of a God who is not passive or indifferent, but actively and continuously working out His purposes. And it is the soil in which most of what Proverbs commends, the prosperity, the good name, the flourishing relationships, the life well built, actually grows. Dreams and intentions and good plans that are never followed up with diligent action produce nothing. But the person who shows up faithfully day after day, who does the work even when they do not feel like it, who maintains their effort through the discouragement and the slow seasons and the uncertain returns, is building something that will eventually produce a harvest. In the hardest seasons, especially the ones marked by grief or fear or emotional exhaustion, maintaining diligence can feel heroic. The bed is too comfortable, and the effort feels pointless, and the outcome is uncertain. But this is precisely when diligence matters most. Keep showing up, keep doing the work, trust God with the harvest, and do your part in the planting and tending. The seeds you sow in the hard season will produce a harvest that the easy season never required of you. Lesson 21. The tongue carries the power of life and death. Use it like it matters. Proverbs 18:21 is one of the most arresting statements about the nature and power of speech in the entire canon of Scripture. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. This is not rhetorical exaggeration. It is a spiritual law, as real and consistent in its operation as the law of gravity. Words are not merely sounds or symbols or neutral carriers of information. They carry power, the power to build and the power to destroy, the power to call forth courage and the power to crush hope, the power to speak life into dying things and the power to speak death into living ones. And this power operates in multiple directions simultaneously. It operates in how we speak to others, the words we choose in our most significant relationships, the daily accumulation of how we speak to the people we love, the way we talk to our children and our spouse and our friends and the people we have authority over. Every conversation is a series of small choices between life and death. And it operates in how we speak over ourselves, the internal narrative, the private self-talk, the stories we speak over our own lives in the quiet of our own minds. I can't do this. Nothing ever works for me. I'm not enough. This is never going to change. These words, spoken repeatedly over our own lives, carry a power that should not be underestimated. In hard seasons, when both dimensions are under the most pressure, the discipline of the tongue, of choosing words of life, even when the honest feelings might be pulling in another direction, is one of the most powerful spiritual practices available. Speak life over others, speak life over yourself, align your words with what God says about your situation and your identity, rather than with the evidence of the hard season alone. Lesson 22. Seek counsel before you decide. Isolation in decision-making is a vulnerability, not a strength. Proverbs 15:22 gives practical counsel that many of us have to work against our instincts to receive. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. And Proverbs 11:14 reinforces it. For lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors. The individualism of Western culture, the belief that self-sufficiency is a virtue, that asking for help is weakness, that needing the input and guidance of others reflects a lack of capability or confidence, runs directly against the consistent wisdom of Proverbs on this point. No individual perspective, however intelligent or experienced, is sufficient on its own for the full complexity of significant decisions. In the hard seasons especially, when our own judgment may be clouded by pain, by fear, by grief, by the tunnel vision that comes from being too close to a difficult situation, the refusal to seek counsel is not a strength. It is a liability. It is the attempt to navigate terrain that is already demanding with a deliberately reduced set of resources. The wise person in a hard season actively seeks the perspective of people whose wisdom they respect, people who are not caught up in the same emotional storm, who can see what proximity and pain may have made invisible, who have relevant experience or knowledge or spiritual insight that can genuinely inform a better decision. This does not mean being paralyzed by too many voices or losing your own sense of direction and judgment. It means building the kind of network of wise relationships that can serve as a genuine resource in the moments that most require it. And it means cultivating the humility, which we have already seen Proverbs prize so highly, to actually receive and genuinely consider what those advisors say, rather than merely performing the consultation while already knowing what you intend to do. Lesson 23. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to the person who wronged you. It is a gift you give yourself. Proverbs 17:9 addresses one of the most difficult and most important choices available to anyone who has been hurt. Whoever would foster love covers over an offense, but whoever repeats the matter separates close friends. To cover an offense, to make the active choice of forgiveness, to refuse to keep returning to the wound and rehearsing it and weaponizing it, is described here as the act of someone who fosters love. It is a creative act, a generative act, an act of someone who has chosen the flourishing of the relationship over the temporary satisfaction of holding the grievance. The alternative, to repeat the matter, to keep bringing up the wound, to make every conversation eventually return to the wrong that was done, to use the offense as a kind of permanent leverage in the relationship, is presented as something that separates people. It drives them apart, and it does so not primarily because the other person eventually gets tired of being accused, though that happens too, but because the person who holds the offense is changed by the holding of it. Resentment is not neutral. It grows. It takes up space. It colors the way you see everything, including things that have nothing to do with the original offense. It makes you, over time, into someone you probably do not want to be. Forgiveness does not require a minimum level of the other person's remorse before it can be given. It does not mean that what happened was acceptable, or that there are no consequences, or that the relationship returns automatically to what it was before. Forgiveness is the decision to release yourself from the prison of bitterness, to stop allowing the wrong done to you to continue defining and shaping you, and to leave the settling of accounts to God. It is, as has been said by many wise people in many ways, primarily a gift you give yourself. In the hard season, it may be one of the most liberating choices available to you. Lesson 24. God weighs the motives of the heart. External compliance is not enough. Proverbs 16:2 delivers a quietly devastating observation about the nature of human self-knowledge. All a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord. The remarkable and rather sobering implication here is that we are capable of convincing ourselves that we are acting from good motives, even when we are not. We are all the protagonist of our own story, and protagonists tend to assign themselves virtuous motivations, even in questionable actions. We can perform generosity while being motivated by the desire for recognition. We can perform humility while being motivated by the fear of exposure. We can pursue reconciliation while being motivated by the desire to appear to be the magnanimous one rather than by genuine care for the relationship. This verse does not suggest that we are always acting from bad motives, or that we should be paralyzed by perpetual suspicious self-examination. It suggests something more nuanced and more useful, that the level of self-knowledge required to accurately assess our own motivations is beyond what we can reliably achieve on our own, and that God's assessment of our motives is more accurate than our own. This is both a warning and an invitation. The warning is to not be satisfied with external compliance, with doing the right thing on the outside for the wrong reasons. God is not impressed by performance that is not accompanied by genuine interior alignment. The invitation is to regularly bring our motivations before God with honest, open questions. Why am I really doing this? What am I actually seeking? Is there something in my motivation that needs to be purified? That kind of honest self-examination, offered regularly to God, is one of the most important practices of genuine spiritual maturity. Lesson 25. There is a future hope for you. It has not been cut off, and it will not be. Proverbs 23:18 carries a promise that is simple, direct, and needs no embellishment. There is surely a future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off. The word surely is doing significant work in this verse. It is not hedged, it is not conditional. It does not say there might be hope, or that there is hope if you perform well enough, or that there is hope as long as circumstances cooperate. There is surely, with certainty, with the weight of God's faithfulness behind it, a future hope for you, and it will not be cut off. In the seasons when everything that you thought constituted your future has been dismantled, when the plans have failed, the relationship has ended, the health has deteriorated, the career has collapsed, the dream has died. The ground beneath what you understood your future to be can feel like it has completely given way. And the loss of a future, or of the imagined future, is one of the most disorienting forms of suffering, because it is not merely the loss of something you had, but the loss of something you hoped and expected to have. It reaches backward and calls into question the meaning of everything that led to it. Into that particular darkness, this verse speaks with a quiet and steady authority. There is a future for you. God is not finished with your story. The chapter that feels like an ending is, in His hands and from His perspective, a turning point. He who directs your steps can see where the path goes from here, even when you cannot. Your hope is not cut off. Let that be an anchor. Lesson 26. Joy is medicine. Choose it with intentionality, even when it does not come naturally. Proverbs 17:22 makes a connection between the inner world and physical well-being that modern science is only recently beginning to understand in depth. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. The connection between the state of the spirit and the condition of the body is real and documented in human experience across millennia. The person whose spirit has been crushed, whose inner world has been beaten down by prolonged grief, by unrelenting difficulty, by the accumulated weight of too many losses without sufficient restoration, often finds that the body reflects that inner condition in tangible physical ways. The bones dry up, the energy depletes, the immune system weakens, the capacity to function diminishes. Conversely, the cheerful heart, the one that has found or chosen or cultivated genuine joy in spite of difficult circumstances, has the quality of medicine. It strengthens, it heals, it gives the capacity to endure and to function and to serve, even in the midst of conditions that might otherwise be debilitating. This is not a call to toxic positivity, to the performance of happiness that masks genuine pain and shuts down the necessary process of honest grieving. Proverbs is far too honest about the dark realities of human experience to recommend anything like that. It is a call to the active cultivation of genuine joy as a spiritual practice, even in hard seasons. This means finding the real things, however small they are, that bring honest delight. The beauty of a particular morning sky, the warmth of a conversation with someone you love, the comfort of a specific passage of scripture, the laughter that breaks through unexpectedly. These are not trivial distractions from the seriousness of your situation. They are forms of nourishment for the spirit that sustain your capacity to face the seriousness. Choose joy, not as a denial of pain, but as a companion to it. Lesson 27. Envy will eat you from the inside. Gratitude and peace are its only cure. Proverbs 14:30 speaks with vivid physicality about the destructive interior work of envy. A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Envy is one of the most insidious sins, precisely because it does its damage primarily to the person who carries it rather than to its object. We envy someone's success, their relationship, their health, their ease, their financial security, and the envy changes nothing about their situation, but it changes everything about ours. It poisons the experience of our own life by making it a constant comparison to someone else's, and ensuring that the comparison always comes out badly for us. It produces a chronic dissatisfaction with what we have that makes genuine gratitude impossible. In hard seasons, envy can feel almost unavoidable. When we are struggling financially and see others who appear to be thriving. When we are grieving and see others who appear to be happy and whole. When we are sick and see others who are healthy. When we are alone and see others surrounded by community and love. The gap can feel not only painful, but somehow personally insulting, as if the other person's good fortune is happening at your expense. But Proverbs points clearly to the spiritual cost of allowing that feeling to become envy. It rots. That is a strong and deliberate word choice. Envy does not just diminish your quality of life, it degrades something essential in you. The antidote is the heart at peace, which Proverbs presents as the result of trusting God's specific, personal provision and design for your life. Contentment, in the biblical sense, is not the resignation of someone who has given up on wanting anything. It is the profound trust of someone who believes that God's provision for them, which is different from God's provision for someone else, as it should be, is genuinely good and sufficient for what they actually need. That trust produces peace, and peace gives life to the body. Lesson 28. Kindness to the poor is, in a very real and significant sense, lending to God Himself. Proverbs 19:17 frames generosity toward the vulnerable in terms that should stop us completely in our tracks. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and He will reward them for what they have done. The language is extraordinary. Not that generosity toward the poor is nice or admirable or even spiritually beneficial. That it is, in effect, a personal financial transaction with the Lord Himself. When you reach out with genuine kindness and material generosity to someone who is in need, when you feed the hungry, clothe the naked, provide for the destitute, speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, you are engaging directly with God. He personally takes responsibility for the repayment. This reframes generosity entirely. It takes it out of the category of optional virtue, something the spiritually mature do as a kind of advanced practice, and places it at the center of what it means to live in relationship with God. The God who is the Father of the fatherless, the defender of the widow, the provider for the stranger. This God takes the treatment of the vulnerable as a personal matter. To be generous toward the poor is to be kind to someone whom God loves specifically and fiercely, and He notices. He records it. He responds to it. In the hard seasons, when our own needs are pressing and the temptation to turn all of our resources and attention inward is at its strongest, this verse calls us to something genuinely difficult and genuinely transformative, to keep our eyes and our hands open to those who have even less than we do, to give even from our lack, to trust that the God who promised to repay will do exactly that. Lesson 29. A clear conscience produces a boldness that cannot be taken from you. Proverbs 28:1 offers a vivid and memorable contrast. The wicked flee, though no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. The person who is living with ongoing hidden wrongdoing, with active deceit, with a double life, with a pattern of behavior they know is wrong, carries a particular kind of perpetual anxiety. Not necessarily a conscious guilt trip, but a low-level background hypervigilance, a sense of being perpetually exposed or about to be caught. A defensiveness that activates even when no threat is actually present. This inner state drains courage and produces a fundamental unease that makes honest, open engagement with life very difficult. The righteous, by contrast, are as bold as a lion. Not because they are somehow naturally more confident or because their circumstances are easier, but because the person who is living with integrity, whose outer life is consistent with their inner convictions, whose behavior is the same whether observed or not, whose conscience is clear before God and before other people, has a quality of boldness that is rooted in something that cannot be manipulated or taken away. It does not depend on other people's opinions. It does not depend on whether one's actions have been noticed and praised. It comes from within, from the deep settledness of a person who knows who they are and is consistently living accordingly. In hard seasons, when the temptation to compromise, to tell a small lie here, to cut a corner there, to bend a principle just this once, is at its most acute, this verse is a reminder of what is at stake. You are not just protecting an abstract virtue. You are protecting the inner quality of boldness that righteous living produces, and that no external improvement in circumstances can manufacture. Lesson 30. What you pour into a child in the early years echoes across a lifetime. Proverbs 22:6 gives one of the most enduring and weighty instructions in the wisdom tradition. Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. This verse has been discussed and interpreted across centuries, and it carries genuine depth in every generation. The direction given to a child, the values modeled before them in the ordinariness of daily life, the habits of prayer and honesty and generosity cultivated from their earliest years, the truths spoken regularly over them about who they are and who God is. The faith lived out before their watching eyes leaves an impression that is deeper and more lasting than almost any other influence in human formation. This does not constitute a guarantee that every child raised in a godly home will walk faithfully with God throughout their life without any detour. Human beings are complex and are gifted with genuine freedom, and the journey of faith is rarely a straight line. Parents who have raised their children with every intention and every available investment in right direction, and who are watching those children walk away from those values in a particular season of life, should not read this verse as a condemnation. It is a principle, not an unconditional promise, and the testimony of countless lives confirms that the seeds planted in early years have a way of producing growth, even when the germination period extends far longer than anyone hoped. For those who are in the position of influence over children, as parents, grandparents, teachers, coaches, mentors, youth workers, this verse calls for the highest possible intentionality about what you are modeling and what you are teaching. What you live before the watching eyes of children carries more weight than what you tell them to do. The hard seasons are not times to hide the faith or pretend that difficulty does not exist. They are opportunities to model what trusting God in the fire actually looks like. Lesson 31. Patience is not passive waiting. It is one of the most powerful forms of strength. Proverbs 14:29 draws a sharp and telling distinction. Whoever is patient has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly. The contrast between great understanding and folly here is stark, and it should give us pause. In a culture that prizes quick reactions, fast responses, decisive action, and the confident assertion of strong opinions, patience is often interpreted as weakness or indecision. But Proverbs consistently presents patience, the ability to endure delay, frustration, or provocation without explosive reaction, as a mark of genuine wisdom and deep understanding. It requires more, not less, than impulsive reaction. To be quick-tempered is to allow your immediate emotional state to determine your response without any processing or reflection. To be driven by the surface of what is happening, rather than the deeper understanding of what is actually needed. Proverbs calls this folly, and not without reason. The quick-tempered response regularly makes situations worse, damages relationships that could have been preserved, reveals things about ourselves that we would have preferred to keep private, and closes doors that patience would have kept open. In the hardest seasons, patience is tested in every form it takes. There is the patience of waiting for God to answer, the patience of allowing a relationship to heal at its own pace rather than forcing resolution before either party is ready. The patience of enduring a prolonged difficulty without the kind of dramatic intervention or relief that would make the endurance unnecessary. In every form, the practice of patience is the practice of trusting that God's timing is not only different from ours, but better than ours, and that the discipline of waiting well is forming something in us that impatient rushing would never produce. Lesson 32. Today is what you have. Do not treat it as a waiting room for tomorrow. Proverbs 27:1 delivers a sobering and clarifying reminder about the nature of time and the presumption of control over the future. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring. The boasting spoken of here is not necessarily verbal and loud. It is more often the quiet, implicit assumption that we have more time, more opportunity, more future than may actually be available to us. The assumption that the important conversation can wait until later, that the expression of love or gratitude or reconciliation can happen when things calm down, that the significant spiritual decision or life reorientation can be deferred to a more convenient moment. Proverbs does not speak against planning or the wisdom of considering the future. Throughout the book, wise preparation and thoughtful foresight are consistently commended. The warning is against the specific pride that treats the future as a possession, something we own and can deploy at our convenience, rather than a gift that belongs to God and is given to us one day at a time. The hard seasons of life often begin precisely at the point where something we had treated as certain and permanent was suddenly gone. The health we assumed we would always have, the person we expected to always be there, the opportunity we intended to take eventually. The conversation we kept meaning to have. This verse is not meant to produce anxiety about uncertainty, but to produce a grateful urgency about today. Use today. Say the things that need to be said today. Do the things that need to be done today. Do not defer what matters on the assumption that tomorrow is guaranteed. It may be. But Proverbs reminds us gently and firmly that only God knows what a day may bring. Lesson 33. The testing of the heart in difficulty reveals and refines what is truly there. Proverbs 17:3 uses one of the oldest metallurgical metaphors available to describe God's process with the human heart. The crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the heart. Silver and gold, the precious metals that have represented the highest material value across virtually every human culture, are refined through an intensely demanding process. They are subjected to extreme heat, which burns away everything that is not genuinely silver or gold, every impurity and every foreign element, leaving behind only what is real, pure, and of genuine value. The heat is not accidental or indifferent. It is the necessary process of purification, and this, Proverbs tells us, is analogous to what God does with the human heart in the seasons of testing and difficulty. The heat of the hard season reveals what is actually in us, not what we think is in us, not what we perform in comfortable conditions, but what is genuinely there at the level of deep character. It burns away the things that were pretense, the beliefs that were only theoretical, the commitments that were conditional, the faith that only functioned when circumstances cooperated, and it leaves behind what is real. This is a profoundly important perspective on suffering, particularly the extended and intense kind. It does not minimize the pain of the furnace. It does not explain away every form of suffering as simply a refining process. Life is too complex, and God's sovereignty too mysterious for that kind of reductionism, but it does offer a framework for understanding why the hardest seasons can produce people of the deepest character and the most genuinely refined faith. The gold you come out with on the other side of the furnace is more valuable than what went in. The testing in the hands of a God who loves you is not punishment, it is purification. Lesson 34. The name of the Lord is the strongest possible place of safety. Run to it. Proverbs 18:10 gives us an image of divine refuge that is both vividly concrete and spiritually inexhaustible. The name of the Lord is a fortified tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. In the military architecture of the ancient world, the tower was the most defensible position in a city. Built with the thickest walls, standing at the greatest height, with the widest sightlines and the best structural protection against assault, the tower was the place you ran to when everything else was vulnerable. It was the last and most reliable stronghold available. The name of the Lord, everything that name represents, his character, his power, his faithfulness, his commitment to those who trust in him, his absolute sovereignty over all circumstances and outcomes, is that tower. It is not merely a comforting metaphor, it is the most secure address in all of existence. And the verse tells us what the righteous do with this knowledge. They run to it. Notice the urgency and the intentionality of that word. Not they walk slowly in that direction when everything else has failed. Not they consider it among other options. They run, with speed and purpose and the committed energy of someone who knows exactly where safety is and is not wasting time getting there. In the hard seasons, the most important spiritual discipline you can practice may be exactly this: to run with everything you have to the name of the Lord, not to the management of your circumstances, not to other people's approval or advice as the primary resource, not to whatever is most immediately available as comfort or distraction. Run to him. He is waiting. He is strong. You will be safe. Lesson 35. Discernment is cultivated long before the crisis. Invest in it now. Proverbs 18:15 describes the character of a genuinely discerning person with a revealing emphasis on posture. The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. Both verbs, acquires and seek out, are active and ongoing. Discernment is not a gift that arrives fully formed at birth or is granted once and requires no further development. It is cultivated through the sustained, humble, intentional pursuit of knowledge, through years of reading, listening, reflecting, observing, and being willing to be taught. The discerning person is the one who has done the long, often invisible work of learning over a lifetime, who has read widely and deeply, who has spent time in sustained engagement with the scriptures and with godly teachers and writers, who has reflected honestly on their own experience and drawn genuine lessons from it, who has listened more than they have spoken and therefore absorbed far more than those who were always the loudest voice in the room. When the moment of decision arrives, particularly in a hard season when the stakes are high and the pressure is intense, this person has resources available to them that simply cannot be improvised in the moment. Discernment is not something you can quickly acquire when you need it urgently. It is built slowly and stored up over time. This is a lesson that calls for investment now. Before the next crisis, before the next major decision, before the next hard season arrives. If you are in a relatively stable period, use it to build your discernment through deep engagement with wisdom. If you are already in the hard season, do what you can to seek knowledge in the midst of it. The ears of the wise are always seeking. Lesson 36. God sees what you carry beneath the surface. You do not have to perform for him. Proverbs 14:13 speaks with unusual depth and psychological honesty about the hiddenness of the human heart. Even in laughter, the heart may ache, and rejoicing may end in grief. This is a verse for the person who has become skilled at wearing the public face that others expect, while carrying something very different in the interior world that very few people ever see. The person who laughs at the gathering and cries in the car on the way home. The person who answers "I'm fine" so many times with such practiced ease that even those closest to them no longer think to question it. The person who performs strength because others are depending on them, or because showing vulnerability seems too risky, or because they themselves are not entirely sure what they are feeling and finding words for it seems beyond them. Proverbs sees this person with extraordinary compassion. It acknowledges that the external and the internal are not always synchronized, that the laughing face and the aching heart can exist simultaneously, and that this is a real and recognizable human experience rather than an anomaly or a failure of authenticity. The deeper implication of this verse in the broader theological context of Proverbs is that God sees both, the laughter and the ache beneath it. He is not fooled or satisfied by our performance of okayness. He knows the whole truth of our interior world, including the parts we have never told anyone and may not have fully admitted to ourselves. You do not have to perform for God. He already knows. And his response to the ache beneath the laughter, as consistent testimony from the Psalms and the prophets and the whole of Scripture attests, is not judgment, but compassion. Bring him the whole truth. Lesson 37. Integrity lived consistently, especially when no one is watching, builds an unshakable life. Proverbs 10:9 states a principle that has been confirmed in the stories of countless lives. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. The security that integrity provides is not primarily external. It is not the security of a good reputation, though that is often a consequence. It is the deep, interior security of a person who does not have to manage a complex web of partial truths, who does not need to remember which version of a story they told to which person, who does not carry the low-level anxiety of someone whose private life and public presentation are significantly different things. The person of integrity has, in a very real and practical sense, a simpler and more stable inner life than the person who lives with inconsistency between the private and the public. This does not mean they are without complexity or struggle or failure. Integrity includes the honest acknowledgement of failure and the genuine commitment to repair and restoration when things go wrong. But their fundamental orientation is one of alignment. What they believe, what they say, and how they live are pointing in the same direction. And that alignment is the foundation of a security that circumstances alone can never provide, and circumstances alone can never fully destroy. In hard seasons, the path of integrity is often the harder path in the short term. The crooked path, the shortcut that compromises a principle, the half-truth that smooths over an uncomfortable situation, the convenient deception that resolves a problem for now, always feels easier in the moment of temptation. But Proverbs is clear. The crooked paths will be found out. What is built on integrity will stand. What is built on deception will eventually collapse. Walk in integrity, in the open, in the light, consistently every day, and you are walking on ground that can hold you even when everything else is shaking. Lesson 38. The plans of the diligent lead to profit, but haste is a form of poverty. Proverbs 21:5 offers a practical principle about the relationship between patience, planning, and positive outcomes. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. D. Two contrasting approaches to pursuing any significant goal are presented here, and the outcomes are framed as equally certain. Diligent planning leads as surely to profit as haste leads to poverty. The certainty cuts in both directions. You can be as sure of the direction of one outcome as the other. Diligent planning is characterized by care, by thoroughness, by the willingness to take the time necessary to think through a decision or a course of action before committing to it. It is not timidity or indecision. It is the opposite of those things. It is the kind of confident, thoughtful preparation that produces action, rooted in genuine understanding rather than reactive impulse. Haste, by contrast, is the response to internal pressure, the anxiety to resolve a situation, the impatience with process and time, the desire for a quick outcome that makes the discomfort of uncertainty stop. And that internal pressure, when it drives decision-making, tends to produce the kind of rushed, underprepared choices that create messes requiring far more time and resource to address than the original careful approach would have demanded. In hard seasons, this principle is especially important because the hard season itself generates enormous pressure to act quickly, to do something, anything, to change the situation and make the discomfort stop. Proverbs offers a steady word: slow down. Think clearly, plan carefully, get counsel, make sure the action you are about to take has been prepared for adequately. The profit of diligent planning is worth the additional time it requires. Lesson 39. Honor the Lord with your first fruits. Giving first is an act of trust, not just generosity. Proverbs 3:9-10 gives an instruction that bridges the material and the spiritual in a way that is both practical and theologically significant. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. The concept of first fruits is foundational in the biblical tradition. The first fruits offering was not made after the harvest was complete, and the farmer had assured himself that his own needs were covered. It was made first, before the full count was in, before the security of the complete harvest was established, as a deliberate act of acknowledging that everything that would come belonged to God first and came from God's provision. This is the posture that the verse is describing. To honor the Lord with your wealth, with your first fruits, is to make God the first claim on your resources rather than the residual one. Not, I will give to God after I have covered all my needs, but I will give to God first, from the top, as an acknowledgement that He is the source of what I have and the owner of everything I think of as mine. This is an act of profound trust, particularly in seasons when the resources feel insufficient and the temptation to protect every available cent is intense. The promise that follows, barns filled to overflowing, vats brimming with new wine, is not a transactional guarantee that every financial gift will be immediately and proportionally repaid. It is a description of the broad trajectory of a life lived in the posture of generous trust toward God. Prosperity, in Proverbs, is not merely financial. It is the holistic flourishing of a life that is aligned with God's character and values. And generous trust toward Him, expressed in the first fruits offering, is one of the most direct expressions of that alignment. Lesson 40. The active promotion of peace in your relationships is a source of deep and lasting joy. Proverbs 12:20 presents a connection between the way we engage with our relationships and the quality of joy we experience. Deceit is in the hearts of those who plot evil, but those who promote peace have joy. The deceit spoken of here is not only outright lying, it includes the whole range of manipulative, self-serving, politically calculated ways of relating to others that use relationship as a tool for personal advantage, rather than a genuine mutual commitment to each other's well-being. And the verse links this kind of relational posture directly to evil, not as an incidental association, but as its natural habitat. Deceit and the plotting of evil occupy the same heart. Joy, by contrast, is found in the heart of the person who promotes peace. And the word promotes is active and intentional. This is not the person who simply avoids conflict because they are conflict-averse or because peace at all costs is less demanding than honest engagement. This is the person who actively works to cultivate genuine, honest, reconciled peace in their relationships, who is willing to have the difficult conversation because the relationship is worth it, who chooses to extend forgiveness even when it is costly, who consistently chooses the good of the relationship over the momentary satisfaction of being right. In hard seasons, this quality of active peace-seeking becomes a form of resilience. The person who is maintaining and repairing their important relationships in the middle of difficulty has the support of those relationships available to them as a resource. And the deep satisfaction of being someone who builds rather than destroys, who leaves every significant relationship better rather than worse, is itself a source of joy that hardship cannot easily take away. Lesson 41. Unexpected generosity toward those who have hurt you can open doors that resentment keeps locked. Proverbs 25, 21, 22 offers instruction that is simultaneously among the most demanding and most potentially transformative in the entire book. If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. Odin, the burning coals metaphor, has generated much discussion among scholars and commentators across the centuries, and the most widely held and contextually supported interpretation is not one of revenge or satisfaction, but of awakening, the kind of deep shame, reconsideration, and even repentance that can be provoked in a person when they receive genuine, unexpected kindness from someone they expected to treat them with hostility or indifference. When we act generously, when we give food to the one who has been our enemy, when we give water to the one who has been hostile, we are not being naive or self-destructively doormat-like. We are operating according to a set of principles that are higher, more powerful, and ultimately more effective than retaliation. We are declaring in the language of action that we are not ruled by what was done to us. We are not going to allow the other person's worst behavior to set the ceiling on our own. We are choosing to live by a standard shaped not by the offense received, but by the character of a God who gives good gifts to those who do not deserve them. The Lord will reward you. That promise is part of the verse, and it is meant to be taken seriously. In the hard seasons when someone has wronged you, responding with unexpected generosity is one of the most costly and most spiritually significant choices you can make. It opens the possibility of transformation in the relationship, in the other person, and most certainly in you. Lesson 42. Carrying genuine inner light makes you a gift to everyone you encounter. Proverbs 15:30 says, "Light in a messenger's eyes brings joy to the heart, and good news gives health to the bones." There is a particular kind of person whose presence is itself a gift, not because their circumstances are easier than everyone else's, or because they are performing cheerfulness from behind a mask, but because they have done the inner work that allows a genuine light to dwell in them and to be communicated naturally to others. Their eyes carry something. When they look at you, you feel seen. When they speak, there is a warmth that is more than style. When they are present in a room, something of the atmosphere changes, almost imperceptibly, for the better. This kind of inner light is not a personality type. It is not the result of being naturally extroverted or socially skilled. It is the result of genuine spiritual formation, of having processed your own pain honestly, of having kept your heart consistently guarded against the root of bitterness, of having cultivated a genuine relationship with God that produces real and sustainable joy, rather than performed positivity. It is the light that comes from someone who has been with God, who is genuinely at peace in the middle of difficulty, because their peace does not depend on the difficulty being resolved, and whose presence becomes a form of ministry simply by being fully present. In the hard seasons, this kind of person is one of the most powerful gifts that God can send into a struggling life. And the invitation of this verse is not just to receive such a person if you are fortunate enough to find one. It is to become one. To do the inner work that makes your presence a source of light rather than simply another shadow. Lesson 43. Moderation is wisdom. Even good things become harmful in excess. Proverbs 25:16 delivers its wisdom with a kind of gentle, practical humor. If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. And Proverbs 25:27 extends the principle, it is not good to eat too much honey, nor is it honorable to search out matters that are too deep. The wisdom here is not complicated or abstract. It is the kind of common sense that generations of human experience have confirmed repeatedly. Even good things become harmful when pursued without limit. Even pleasures that are genuinely pleasurable in appropriate measure become their opposite when indulged to excess. The principle extends far beyond honey and food. Proverbs' wisdom here applies to the full range of human appetites and pursuits. The person who works so hard that their health and relationships are destroyed. The person who uses entertainment or social media or food or alcohol as an anesthetic for pain and gradually crosses the line from comfort into dependency. The person who becomes so consumed by the acquisition of knowledge or money or recognition that every other value in their life is subordinated to it. In every case, the thing that began as good has become consuming and ultimately harmful. Wisdom knows the difference between enough and too much, and has the discipline to stay on the right side of that line. This requires self-knowledge, the ongoing, honest assessment of our appetites and their effects, and the cultivation of the kind of inner governance that does not rely on circumstances to impose limits from the outside, but that carries the capacity for appropriate self-regulation from within. Lesson 44. Integrity is an internal compass. It guides you when the external landscape is confusing. Proverbs 11:3 states a principle about the function of integrity that goes beyond its usual framing as simply a moral virtue. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Notice what this verse says. Integrity actually does. It guides. It functions as an internal navigation system. When the person of integrity faces a decision or a crossroads, their own consistency of character, the alignment between their values, their commitments, and their behavior, provides a kind of inner directional clarity that does not depend entirely on external guidance. They know who they are. They know what they have committed to. The question of what to do in a difficult situation is not always easy, but the general direction of integrity points them clearly. Duplicity, the divided heart, the inconsistent character, the willingness to be one person in one context and a different person in another, does the opposite. It creates inner chaos. When a person has been making convenience-based moral compromises over time, they gradually lose the ability to trust their own judgment because they know their judgment is not reliably governed by principle. Their own history of inconsistency makes it impossible to rely on their instincts. And when the real crisis comes, when the decision is genuinely high stakes and the pressure is intense, the person of duplicity has no stable internal ground to stand on. Integrity, built over time through thousands of small, consistent choices, is one of the most valuable assets you can carry into the hard seasons of life. It will guide you when external guidance is unavailable or unreliable. Lesson 45. All hard work produces something real, even when the results are not immediately visible. Proverbs 14:23 gives a straightforward and unqualified assessment. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. All hard work. Not some hard work, not hard work in favorable conditions, not hard work combined with the right connections and the right timing and a measure of luck. All. There is a comprehensive quality to this statement that is meant to be reassuring to the person who is working faithfully and not yet seeing the fruit of their labor in any obvious form. The profit is not always immediately visible, and it is not always expressed in the currency our culture values most. The grief work that someone is doing in the aftermath of loss, the honest, difficult, sustained process of mourning well, is hard work that produces a real profit in emotional and spiritual maturity, in the deepening of compassion, in the development of a kind of wisdom that only comes through genuine suffering, genuinely processed. The work of maintaining a struggling relationship, the repeated choosing of difficult conversations over comfortable silence, the ongoing practice of forgiveness and grace, is hard work that produces a real profit in the depth and resilience of the connection. The discipline of maintaining spiritual practices in a dry season, continuing to read and pray and gather with others when none of it feels meaningful, is hard work that is doing something real in the unseen interior, building a kind of faithfulness that circumstances cannot easily erode. Mere talk, the intention without the action, the plan without the follow-through, the grand vision without the daily discipline to pursue it, produces nothing. But the hard work, even when unobserved, even when slow, even when the results seem elusive, always yields something real. Trust the process. Lesson 46. God is the personal defender of those who are exploited and helpless. He takes their case. Proverbs 23:10-11 contains both a warning and a profound assurance. Do not move an ancient boundary stone or encroach on the fields of the fatherless, for their defender is strong. He will take up their case against you. The boundary stone was the physical marker of property and inheritance in ancient Israel. To move it was to steal from someone, often someone who was already vulnerable. To encroach on the fields of the fatherless was to exploit those who had no father, no patron, no protector, no advocate in the social and legal structures of the time. It was the exploitation of the most vulnerable by the most powerful. But Proverbs does not present this exploitation as going unnoticed or unanswered. Their defender is strong. God himself is the Redeemer, the Goel, the next of kin, the one who takes up the case of those who have no one else to advocate for them. He sees the exploitation, he records the injustice, and he will take up the case. This is not a distant or passive position. It is an active, engaged advocacy on behalf of those who have been wronged. For those who are in hard seasons specifically because they have been exploited, cheated, or wronged by someone with more power than they have, this truth is a specific and personal word. God sees it. He has not missed it. He is not indifferent. He is strong, and he is your defender. His justice may not operate on your timeline, but it does not fail. Trust him to take up your case. Lesson 47. Strategic silence at the right moment is among the highest forms of wisdom. Proverbs 17:27-28 makes a point about the relationship between words and wisdom that is both humbling and practical. The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. Restraint in speech is presented here as a mark of knowledge and understanding. The person of genuine wisdom does not feel compelled to fill every silence, respond to every provocation, comment on every situation, or ensure that their perspective is heard in every conversation. They have the inner security and the situational awareness to know when speaking will add value and when it will not, and the discipline to act accordingly. The final observation of this passage is delivered with a kind of quiet humor. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent. The implication is that the gap between the appearance of wisdom and actual wisdom can be bridged simply by not speaking when speaking would reveal the absence of genuine understanding. But the deeper implication is for the genuinely wise person. If even silence from a fool creates the impression of wisdom, how much more does intentional, disciplined restraint from someone who actually has something to say convey genuine thoughtfulness and depth? In hard seasons, when emotions are raw and every situation seems to call for a response, the discipline of strategic silence is extraordinarily valuable. Not every accusation requires a rebuttal. Not every provocation requires a reaction. Not every opinion offered about your situation requires engagement. Learning to hold your tongue, to let the moment pass, to wait before responding, to give space for the situation to develop before inserting yourself into it, is a form of wisdom that consistently produces better outcomes than the impulsive response. Lesson 48. The path of the righteous grows brighter, even when it currently feels like a dim dawn. Proverbs 4:18 offers one of the most genuinely beautiful and hope-filled images in the entire book. The path of the righteous is like the morning sun, shining ever brighter till the full light of day. The morning sun does not arrive all at once. It does not go from pitch darkness to blazing noon in an instant. It begins at the edge of the horizon as the faintest suggestion of light, a slight brightening of the deep dark, and then, gradually, steadily, inevitably, it fills the sky. The light grows, the warmth increases, the visibility extends, and eventually the full light of day is present in all its blazing, comprehensive clarity. This is the trajectory of the life lived in righteousness, in genuine, sincere, persevering pursuit of God's ways. It does not always look dramatic or rapidly progressive from the inside. There are days, especially in the hard seasons, when it feels as if the light has not increased at all. When the path seems as obscure as it did 6 months ago, when the growth seems stalled, when the questions are still unanswered, and the difficulties still unresolved. But the promise of this verse is that this is not the full picture. The path of the righteous is on a trajectory of increasing light. The evidence of that trajectory may not be visible every day, but it is real. Keep walking in what you know to be right and true. The full light of day is coming. You are further along the trajectory than you can see. Lesson 49. Correction and instruction are the path to life. Receive them as the gifts they are. Proverbs 6:23 frames the often difficult experience of being corrected in terms that radically change how it feels to receive it. For this command is a lamp, this teaching is a light, and correction and instruction are the way to life. The commands and teachings of God's wisdom are lamp and light. They illuminate the path so that we can see where we are and where we are going. And correction and instruction, the words and circumstances and people that challenge our current direction, are the way to life. Not an obstacle on the way to life, not a detour or an interruption, the way itself. This means that the uncomfortable experience of being corrected, whether by a passage of scripture that lands with uncomfortable precision, or by a trusted friend who speaks truth you are not seeking, or by the consequences of a choice that is making clear through painful feedback that a different direction was needed, is actually, in its proper understanding, a gift. It is the lamp showing you something about the path that you needed to see. It is the light that makes visible what the darkness of comfort and confirmation was keeping hidden. It is the way to life. The person who can receive correction well, who can hear it without becoming defensive, who can sit with the discomfort of it long enough to extract its genuine wisdom, who can respond with honest self-examination rather than reflexive self-justification, is on the way to life in a way that the person who walls off all correction can never be. Stay teachable. The correction, however unwelcome, is serving you. Lesson 50. God built the universe by wisdom and invites you to access that same wisdom for your life. Proverbs 3:19-20 sets wisdom in its most breathtaking possible context. By wisdom, the Lord laid the earth's foundations. By understanding, he set the heavens in place. By his knowledge, the watery depths were divided, and the clouds let drop the dew. These verses are not poetic embellishment. They are a theological declaration of the most significant kind, the same quality, wisdom, that God used to design and build the created order, is the quality that he is offering to the men and women who seek it from him. The architecture of the cosmos, with all its staggering complexity, its precise and elegant calibration for the existence of life, its billions of galaxies and its equally intricate molecular structures, was designed by wisdom. That same wisdom is not withheld from you. When we seek God's wisdom for our lives, for the decisions we face, the relationships we are navigating, the hard seasons we are walking through, we are not reaching for something small or incidental or second-rate. We are reaching for the quality that is responsible for everything that exists and that functions. The intelligence that calibrated the gravitational constant to 1 part in 10 to the 40th power so that stars could form, that designed the human immune system, that established the mathematical laws underlying the entire physical universe. This is what is on offer to you for the navigation of your life. This should produce, in equal measure, a profound humility and a profound confidence. Humility, because the wisdom that made the universe is infinitely beyond anything we can independently produce. Confidence, because it is available to us, generously, as James confirms, without reproach, to all who ask. Ask for it. In the hard season, in the complex decision, in the confusing circumstance, in the relational tangle, ask for the wisdom by which God made all things. Lesson 51. The fear of the Lord is medicine. It heals the whole person. Proverbs 3:7-8 links the posture of reverence toward God with physical well-being in a way that should expand our understanding of what spiritual health actually means. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. The idea that spiritual orientation toward God has physical effects is not foreign to modern understanding. The growing field of research into the effects of stress, anxiety, and psychological state on physical health gives us a contemporary framework for understanding what Proverbs is saying. But the verse is making a bolder claim than simply that reduced anxiety is good for your health. Being wise in your own eyes, living from a posture of self-sufficiency and self-reliance, treating your own judgment as the ultimate reference point, not submitting your life to God's authority and guidance, produces a specific kind of strain. It is the strain of carrying more than we were designed to carry, of playing a role in our own lives that belongs to God rather than to us. We were made for dependence on God, not a begrudging, reluctant dependence, but the natural, relieved, life-giving dependence of a creature living in right relationship with its Creator. When we resist that dependence, when we insist on being the ultimate authority over our own lives, we take on a weight that was never designed for our frames. The fear of the Lord removes that weight. It places the ultimate authority and responsibility back where they belong, with God, and allows us to live in the freedom and relief of a creature rightly related to its Creator. This is health for the body and nourishment for the bones. This is what it feels like to be living in the proper alignment of your design. Lesson 52. A little gained righteously is worth infinitely more than much gained wrongfully. Proverbs 16:8 delivers a value judgment that runs against the grain of virtually every cultural narrative about success and achievement. Better a little with righteousness than much gain with injustice. The word better here is a strong comparative. It is not merely saying that righteousness is a nice addition to wealth, a desirable quality alongside material success. It is saying that a little, gained honestly and lived with integrity, is genuinely, substantially, and in every meaningful way better than a great deal gained through means that compromise justice and truth. This judgment applies not only to obviously illegal or overtly corrupt forms of financial gain, but to the whole range of quieter compromises. The exaggeration on the resume, the half-truth in the negotiation, the willingness to overlook an injustice because challenging it would cost us the deal, the accumulation of advantage through methods that are technically legal but ethically questionable. Proverbs does not draw a line at the edge of legality and declare everything within it equally acceptable. It asks a deeper question about the alignment of our financial and professional lives with the character of a God who is thoroughly and uncompromisingly just. In hard seasons, especially financial ones, this line is where the pressure is often greatest. The temptation to take the shortcut that crosses the line, to tell the lie that saves the deal, to make the agreement that compromises a principle, is most acute when the stakes feel the highest. But Proverbs is a steady voice in those moments. The little gained righteously is genuinely better. Keep the integrity. The God who is the defender of the fatherless is also the vindicator of those who choose righteousness over gain. Lesson 53. Faithfulness over time is one of the most richly blessed qualities a person can cultivate. Proverbs 28:20 holds out an expansive and quietly significant promise. A faithful person will be richly blessed, but one eager to get rich will not go unpunished. Faithfulness, the quality of being trustworthy, consistent, reliable, honest, and persevering over the long term, regardless of the changes in circumstance or the fluctuations in reward, is one of the most highly prized qualities in all of Proverbs. It mirrors the character of God himself, who is described throughout the scriptures as the faithful one, utterly reliable, completely consistent, always doing what he has said he will do, never breaking a commitment or abandoning a promise, no matter the cost. The person who cultivates genuine faithfulness in their own life is living according to a quality that reaches beyond mere habit or discipline into something that reflects the image of God. Faithful in marriage, when passion has given way to the slower, deeper love of long companionship. Faithful in ministry, when the visible results are small and the recognition is absent. Faithful in friendship, through the seasons of difficulty, when showing up costs something. Faithful in financial integrity, when the pressures of survival would seem to justify a corner being cut. Faithful in daily spiritual practices, when the feelings have long since stopped providing motivation. This consistent, unglamorous, deeply important faithfulness is, Proverbs tells us, richly blessed. The contrast, eagerness to get rich, the impatient grasping for quick reward that is willing to bypass the slow process of faithful building, leads to punishment, to an outcome that, however promising it initially appears, will not hold. Trust the slow work of faithfulness. It is building something that will last. Lesson 54. Real friendship is proven in adversity, and it is one of God's most tangible gifts. Proverbs 17:17 gives one of the most complete and beautiful definitions of genuine friendship in any literature. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. The phrase "a friend loves at all times" is a sweeping statement about the unconditional quality of genuine friendship. Not at convenient times, not when the social benefits of the relationship are clearly present, not when the other person is easy to love and life is going smoothly and being their friend costs nothing. At all times, in the difficult and the easy, the public triumph and the private failure, the seasons of vibrancy and the seasons of total depletion. And then the verse adds something remarkable about the specific significance of adversity. A brother is born for a time of adversity. There is a sense in which the deepest, most essential level of a genuinely close relationship is not called into being by the good times, but by the hard ones. It is adversity that reveals who is truly committed to you, who will show up when showing up is costly, who will stay when staying is inconvenient, who will keep coming back when the situation is complicated and prolonged and there is no quick resolution in sight. These people are not manufactured by circumstance. They are given by God, and they are among the most significant gifts He places in a human life. In the hard seasons, take note of who shows up, and beyond receiving that gift with deep gratitude, commit yourself to being that person for others, to being the one who loves at all times, to being the brother or sister who was, in someone else's hardest season, born for exactly this time. Lesson 55. Commit your works to God first, then watch what He does with your plans. Proverbs 16:3 offers an instruction that is both simple and thoroughly demanding. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans. The word commit here carries the sense of rolling something off your own back onto another. The image is of someone carrying a burden and rolling it onto the back of another who is stronger and more capable of carrying it. To commit our works to the Lord is to bring them to Him, to lay them before Him, to genuinely surrender our agenda and our outcome orientation and say, "This is yours, not mine. I am a steward, not an owner. I am a co-laborer, not the ultimate authority over where this goes." This runs against a deeply rooted human instinct, particularly the instinct of competent, ambitious people who are accustomed to determining their own outcomes. To genuinely commit rather than just perform commitment requires a real release of control. It requires holding our plans and goals loosely enough that God can redirect them, which means being genuinely willing to be redirected, willing to find out that what we thought was the plan is not actually the plan, or that the timing is different, or that the method needs significant revision. It is the kind of surrender that is much easier to express in moments of devotion than to live in the daily reality of pursuing meaningful goals. But the promise is extraordinary. He will establish your plans. Plans that are genuinely committed to God, offered to Him in real surrender, pursued as an expression of partnership with Him rather than an independent assertion of our own will, have a quality of stability and fruitfulness that self-directed plans cannot match. He establishes them, meaning they stand on ground that is not of our making and that does not shake when our own resources are insufficient. Lesson 56. Bringing hidden things into the light is the pathway to mercy, not judgment. Proverbs 28:13 announces one of the most important spiritual laws in the entire book, and it is one that many people in the hard seasons most urgently need to receive. Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. There is a specific and real spiritual and psychological cost to concealment, to carry hidden guilt, to know in the private interior where the truth is always accessible, regardless of what we present to the outside world, that something we have done is wrong, and to manage that knowledge rather than address it is to carry a weight that accumulates over time with growing damage. The concealment does not solve the problem. It preserves it, and as it is preserved, it tends to grow, casting its shadow over other areas of life in ways that may not be immediately traceable to the original hidden thing. The person who conceals does not prosper, not primarily because of external consequences. though those often come in time, but because the inner world cannot flourish under the weight of sustained, deliberate dishonesty about what is truly there. But the person who confesses, who brings the hidden thing into the light, who names it honestly before God, and when appropriate, before the people it has affected, finds mercy. This is the extraordinary promise. Not judgment, not condemnation, not the exposure and punishment that fear anticipates and that keeps so many people locked in the silence of concealment for years. Mercy. The active, generous, restoring response of a God who already knows everything you are confessing, who has been waiting for you to bring it into the open, and whose response to genuine confession and genuine turning away is not what our fear-shaped imagination tells us it will be. It is mercy. Come out of hiding. Mercy is waiting. Lesson 57. Whatever is coming, God's wisdom can lead you through it. Nothing is beyond his reach. Proverbs 2:6-8 gives us a sweeping assurance about the source and scope of divine wisdom. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He holds success in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless, for he guards the course of the just and protects the way of his faithful ones. The wisdom that Proverbs commends from beginning to end is not a human achievement. It does not originate in the accumulated cultural wisdom of the sage tradition, however valuable that tradition is. It comes from God himself, from his mouth, from his own nature and character, and the overflow of his infinite knowledge and understanding. This means that when Proverbs calls us to seek wisdom, it is ultimately calling us to seek God. To pursue wisdom is to pursue God himself, his character, his ways, his word, his presence, his guidance. And the person who does so, who walks in genuine blamelessness, who pursues faithfulness with their whole heart, receives something remarkable: God's personal protection. He is a shield. He guards the course. He protects the way. This is not merely the good feeling of religious practice. It is active, personal, divine protection of the person who is walking in sincere pursuit of his ways. In whatever hard season you are facing, this is the assurance that undergirds every other truth in this book. The God who gives wisdom is also the God who guards those who walk in it. He knows the way through what you are facing. He has gone before you into it, and he will protect your passage through it as you trust and follow him. Lesson 58. Even the path you cannot understand is being directed by someone who can. Proverbs 20:24 states something both humbling and deeply reassuring. A person's steps are directed by the Lord. How then can anyone understand their own way? The question at the end of this verse is not rhetorical despair. It is an invitation to a very specific kind of trust. The honest answer to how can anyone understand their own way is not fully, not from the inside, not from the limited vantage point of a single human life being lived from within. We do not have access to the full picture of what our steps are building toward, what God is accomplishing through the specific contours of the path we are on, what purposes are being served by the particular difficulties and detours and delays of our journey. And this is not a problem that more intelligence or more spiritual maturity will entirely resolve. Even the wisest and most spiritually formed person has a limited vantage point on their own life. The difference is that the wise person has made peace with this limitation, has learned to hold the mystery of their own story with something approaching trust rather than anxiety. They have experienced enough of God's faithfulness in the past to trust his direction in the present, even when that direction is obscure. They have received enough of his guidance to believe that the steps they cannot understand are nevertheless being directed by someone who understands them perfectly. This is the confidence that Proverbs wants to build in us through all 60 of these lessons. Not the confidence that we will always understand, but the confidence that God always does, and that He is directing our steps with a precision and a care that our limited perspective cannot fully appreciate from the inside. Lesson 59. The fruit of a righteous life becomes a tree of life for others. Your story will nourish people you have not yet met. Proverbs 11:30 contains one of the most expansive and outward-facing promises in the entire book. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and the one who is wise saves lives. The tree of life appears at the beginning of the human story in the Garden of Eden and at the end of the story in the New Jerusalem. And in both places, it is characterized by extraordinary abundance and generosity, bearing fruit every month with leaves for the healing of the nations. It is not a tree that hoards its fruit. It is a tree that provides generously and continuously for all who have access to it. When you walk in righteousness, when you choose day after day and season after season to pursue God's ways, to maintain integrity under pressure, to extend forgiveness when it would be easier to hold on to bitterness, to practice generosity when fear would recommend withholding, to guard your heart and your tongue and your relationships with wisdom, you are becoming a tree of life. The fruit of that righteous life, the wisdom, the character, the testimony, the example, the depth that is produced by a life genuinely lived in accordance with God's ways, becomes a resource for everyone in your orbit. And the wisdom you carry saves lives, not always dramatically, not always in ways that are visible or recognized. But the wise person who speaks truth at the right moment, who models faithfulness in a way that gives someone else permission to believe it is possible, who demonstrates that it is possible to walk through the hardest season without losing your soul. That person is saving something in the people who are watching. Your righteous life is not just for you. It is a tree that others will feed from. Let it grow. Lesson 60. The fear of the Lord leads to life, a full, deep, unshakable, genuinely abundant life. We return at last to where we began, but we arrive here differently. Not as someone who has just been introduced to the concept, but as someone who has walked 60 lessons deep into its implications and its dimensions. Proverbs 19:23 is the verse that brings the whole journey to its completion. The fear of the Lord leads to life. Then one rests content, untouched by trouble. This is the destination that all of Proverbs has been pointing toward, not a destination that exists only after death, not a state reserved for the spiritual elite, not a condition that requires the absence of all difficulty. It is available in this life, in this season, even in the hardest one you have ever faced. The life that the fear of the Lord leads to is a life that is genuinely, deeply, sustainably full. Not full of the things that our culture tells us constitute a full life, but full in the ways that actually satisfy the deepest human needs. Full of wisdom that navigates complexity with grace. Full of relationships that are marked by genuine love and integrity. Full of the kind of peace that does not depend on circumstances, because its source is not circumstances, but the character and presence of God. Full of a hope that is not fragile, because it is not built on what is visible. Full of the productive satisfaction of diligent work done faithfully and offered to God. Full of the deep, quiet, sustaining joy that is the fruit of a heart that has been guarded and tended and given over to God season after season. To rest content, untouched by trouble, this is not a promise that trouble will not come. The whole of Proverbs speaks honestly and repeatedly about the troubles that come to every human life. The righteous fall, the wicked prosper temporarily. Injustice exists, relationships fracture. The future is uncertain, the body fails, the heart aches. None of this is hidden or denied. But the person whose life is rooted in the fear of the Lord carries something that trouble cannot fundamentally destabilize. A foundation that holds when everything built upon it shakes. a peace that is deeper than the surface disturbance of the hardest season, a contentment that is not dependent on the resolution of every difficulty because it is sourced in the unchanging, unshakable character of God. This is what these 60 lessons have been building toward. Not a collection of practical tips for a better life, though they are genuinely practical. Not a self-improvement program with a biblical veneer. A profound, whole-life reorientation around the only foundation that is strong enough to hold the full weight of a human life in all its beauty and all its difficulty. The fear of the Lord leads to life. Let it lead you there. 60 lessons. A journey through the book of Proverbs, ancient wisdom that was already old when Solomon first committed it to writing. And that is as alive and precise and immediately relevant as this specific moment in your specific life. These truths have traveled across thousands of years and countless human generations. They have carried people through the loss of children and the collapse of empires, through betrayal by those closest to them, through poverty and persecution and the slow, grinding difficulty of seasons that seem to have no end in sight, through doubt and grief and confusion and the long, quiet darkness of a faith being tested. They have shaped characters that became pillars of their communities. They have restored marriages that were all but over. They have guided decisions that changed the trajectories of whole family lines. They are alive, and they are not merely ancient advice. They are a revelation of the character of a God who is not distant from the details of your life, who does not remove himself to the heights of transcendence while you struggle on the plain below. He is the God who sits with you in the hard season, who meets you in the marketplace and the bedroom, at the crossroads of impossible decisions, and in the middle of the night when fear will not let you sleep, and who says, "Here is what you need. Here is the wisdom that will carry you through this. Here is what I know, and what I have placed in these pages for exactly this moment in exactly this life. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Return to it in the morning. Return to it in the difficulty. Return to it when the way is clear and when it is utterly obscure. He is the same in every season. His wisdom does not change with the circumstances. His faithfulness does not waver with your performance. His love is not contingent on your having it together. He is the strong tower, and the righteous run to him and are safe. To every person who has walked through these 60 lessons today, who came to this video carrying something heavy, looking for a word that would help them hold on, I want you to know that these truths are not simply for your mind. They are for your spirit. Take them, write them down, pray over them, bring them back out when the next hard moment arrives. Let them become part of the inner language of your faith. Let them be the things you say to yourself when fear is loud and God seems quiet. They are true, they hold, they will carry you. Before I close, let me speak to you one final time as the community you are. Right now, people from dozens of nations are watching this same video, sitting in different seasons of their lives, in different circumstances, carrying different burdens, but gathered around the same ancient truth. There is a power in that. You are not alone, and the community that gathers around God's word in this space is something genuinely real and genuinely significant. If this video has ministered to you, if even one of these 60 lessons has landed in a place in you where it was truly needed, please do something that costs you very little but means a great deal to this ministry. Subscribe to this channel if you are not already subscribed, and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss what is coming. Every new video is an investment in your spiritual walk, deep, scripture-based, unhurried teaching that is designed to help you live with genuine wisdom in every season of life. Hit the subscribe button now. Tell someone else about this channel. Share this video with someone who is in a hard season and could use exactly this kind of word. Your share may be the thing that brings this teaching to someone who desperately needs it and does not yet know where to find it. If this video has blessed you, please like it. It is a small act with a significant effect on how many people this teaching reaches. And if you have watched this video and are considering going deeper, becoming part of the closer community, receiving early access to each new teaching before it goes public, and connecting with others who are serious about walking with God in wisdom, the membership option is open to you. I would love to have you join. And now, to close, a blessing for every person watching. May the wisdom of the book of Proverbs take root in you like a tree planted beside living water, and may its fruit be abundant in every season, including this hard one. May the fear of the Lord be the steady, unshakable foundation beneath your feet, holding you even when everything else is uncertain. May you guard your heart with vigilance and grace, and may what flows from it be a source of life to everyone within your reach. May you find the friends who stay when staying is costly, and may you be that kind of friend for someone else. May your tongue speak life and your hands do good, and your plans be committed to the God who establishes what is His. May you rise every time you fall, every single time, with the confidence of someone who knows that their God is the God who lifts. May your path grow brighter with every step, like the morning sun, moving inevitably toward the full, blazing, unobstructed light of day. And may you know, not as a theological concept, but as the deepest, most sustaining truth of your interior life, that the Lord is your strong tower, that you are safe inside Him, and that there is surely a future hope for you. It has not been cut off. It will not be. God bless you. Thank you.